Friends, along with Michelle Banache on the Travel Michigan radio program. And Michelle, where are we headed to next?
We are headed to the Detroit Historical Museum, and we're talking with Bob Burry, Executive Director and CEO of the museum, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michelle. Hello, Dave.
Hello. So you have some big news. You are reopening after some pretty extensive renovations, correct?
We are. We had closed the museum after Memorial Day back in May, and for 6 long months, although they went pretty darn quickly, we've been working really hard to refresh and renew the Detroit Historical Museum, and based on initial reactions from some of our early visitors, they like what we've done.
Well, you know, the Detroit Historical Museum was already one of my favorite city museums, maybe my favorite city museum, and I can't imagine you doing anything better than what you did before. What are the renovations that you've done?
Well, you know, it's funny you should say that, because one of the first things that people tell us is, I hope you didn't change the streets of Old Detroit.
Exactly.
Because everyone has a great memory of being on the streets of Old Detroit, either as a child or on a school tour, or maybe with as a parent with their kids, or on a school field trip. And the good news is we didn't change it too much, but we did improve it. We still have the same feeling that you have of walking through Detroit in the 1800s. We were able to add a brand new store, a Sanders store, which has a lot of great memories for people.
Makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Yeah, and we also added some technology that's kind of elective technology, so it doesn't change the kind of peaceful, nostalgic feel. But if you want to take a little deeper dive in some of the subjects about, you know, tell me more about the Kresge store, tell me more about Fred Sanders, you can use the computer-based technology to do that.
Well, that's the great thing about that section of the museum, is that it tells this very rich cultural, historical story about a part of the country that is very important to the rest of the country.
Well, it is, and you know, it's we've always done a good job in telling those early parts of Detroit history, both on the streets of Old Detroit and up on the first floor in our Frontiers to Factories exhibit. And we've really done a good job, I believe, in the 1700s and the 1800s. So when we undertook this renovation and reinvention, really, we've had a much more focus on the last 100 years. Because maybe we, with the exception of the auto industry, we didn't look into that perhaps as deeply as we'd like to, and now we have.
Well, it sounds like a great idea. It reminds me of a conversation I recently had with my son, and it was just like an epiphany for me to realize that, you know, landing on the moon and walking on the moon was no big deal to him. He's that young.
Sure.
And to him, it's a far gone, you know, story. But we generally don't tell the somewhat recent stories of our past.
Right, and you can define recent in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
But we one of the big stories of Detroit and Michigan, of course, is Detroit's role in World War II as the arsenal of democracy, and that's a story that, you know, many of the World War II veterans, who are becoming less and less every day, know vividly, and it's emblazoned in their memories. But we looked at Detroit's role in World War II in our Arsenal of Democracy exhibit from a little different perspective, and really two ways. We looked at what Detroit and Detroiters and manufacturing in the state of Michigan did to help win the war, to really provide what President Roosevelt said at the time, to create that arsenal of democracy that had the team and the talent and, above all, the will to get it done, and the great success that the Allied forces had because of Detroit's efforts. But we also look on the other side of that, too. And so what did the World War II mean for Detroit and Michigan? How did that really define the population, where they lived, who they were, the evolution of women in the workforce, the migration from the South? A lot of really startling stories that help explain where the city and state land today.
Well, you know, I think the challenge for you as a historian and as a museum person is that you in Detroit, because you happen to be telling the story of Detroit, have so many stories to tell. Most cities, and the reason I don't generally get too excited about city museums, is because most cities don't have much of a story to tell.
Well, that's right. You know, in Detroit, really, you can say it impacted the state and the region and all that, but it really impacted the nation and the world. And if another one of our brand new galleries is the Gallery of Innovation. And we looked at innovation, again, from a uniquely Detroit perspective. And we looked at of course, people that you would think of being as innovators, people like Henry Ford and people like Harvey Earl and Albert Kahn, who designed many of the beautiful historic buildings in Detroit. But we also looked at people who are lesser known and who are very contemporary. We looked at, for example, there's a woman by the name of Brownie Wise who invented the concept of a Tupperware party. And, Tupperware party, which is kind of the multi-level marketing in-home parties, really defined a whole new industry. And it was created by a Detroit housewife back in the early 50s. So innovation, the idea here being is that you can innovate in a variety of ways, and there are people innovating today. We have two people featured in the exhibit. One is Veronica Scott, a young woman who was working, a CCS student actually, who developed a coat that turns into a blanket to meet a social need for the homeless population. We have Josh Linkner from Detroit Venture Partners, who is partnered with Dan Gilbert and the Quicken Loans team to really do some of that innovative thinking that's really going to define Detroit and the region going forward.
One of the big topics of the day these days is unions and, the whole beginning of the union movement, and I'm sure you tell that story quite well.
We sure do, because there was an awful lot of innovation there. We tell that story kind of all over in the Innovation Gallery, in the Gallery of the Arsenal of Democracy, as well as in our Motor City exhibit. We've really enhanced the Motor City exhibit to bring it much more up to date, make it much more interactive. All of our exhibits really have a big emphasis on some video presentations and interactive games and challenges. So you do more than just get educated, but you also get inspired.
Well, and I'm looking at this information, and I love that you guys are open on weekends. You have extended holiday hours, so you're accessible when people have the time to visit the museum. And if I'm reading this correctly, admission is free?
Well, that's right. And, one of the things we started when we did our renovation and reinvention, if you will, is focus on relevance, tell some of those more current stories, and also increase the accessibility. How do we get as many people to both visit the museums as well as appreciate and enjoy our vast amount of online resources? So we opened with a free admission policy. Since we opened in right after Thanksgiving, we've had over 35,000 people. And they keep on coming, and it's great because it's a great opportunity for people to enjoy all that we have to offer and have that experience, some of them for the first time.
Well, Bob, we have less than a minute to go, but, being part of the entire cultural institution and being right there kind of in the middle of it all, you really kind of bring it all together, and I really highly recommend people check out the Detroit Historical Museum. It's really quite a treasure.
Well, we do. And one last thought. If someone's apprehensive about history, think it's boring, that kind of thing, our Gallery of Culture looks at the big stories of sports and entertainment. And one of our big new attractive features is the Kid Rock Music Lab, which tells the story of Detroit's music from the last 100 years. It's a big hit. If you like jazz, gospel, hip-hop, Eminem, Kid Rock, the Supremes, or Motown, it's all in there, and it's a great experience and worth the trip for that alone.
Absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to visit the new Detroit Historical Museum. I'll be checking it out soon myself. So thank you, Bob, and great job. Can't wait. Bob Burry, Executive Director and CEO of the Detroit Historical Museum. Recommend you check that out soon, and you can do that virtually by going to DetroitHistorical.org. Lots of events happening right now, Michelle. Tell us about some of those, please.
Absolutely. One of them, on Christmas Day, which is right around the corner, you can actually ski free with Santa on Shush Mountain at Shanty Creek Resorts in Bel Air. And who wouldn't want to ski with Santa? And, as we've been talking about throughout the show, New Year's is right around the corner, and there are a ton of events on Michigan.org. We've already talked about Marquette and Midland. Some of the other ones happening are Northville Night, which will take you through the decades from the Roaring 20s all the way through the future, right up to the countdown at midnight. Or you can head up to Ludington for Light Up the Lake, the New Year's Eve ball drop. Now, Ludington claims they have the Michigan's largest New Year's Eve ball drop, so a little friendly competition happening, but they also will have a fireworks salute at midnight. And in Charlevoix, they will have the New Year's Bridge Drop with a weekend full of activities, which ends with the drawbridge in Charlevoix being dropped at midnight amidst music, sparklers, and a bridge procession. And for sports lovers out there, Metro Detroit is the place to be on December 26th. The Harlem Globetrotters come to the Palace of Auburn Hills. The Little Caesars Pizza Bowl at Ford Field, where Michigan's own Central Michigan Chippewas will meet the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. So fire up chips out there.
The Hilltoppers?
The Hilltoppers. And finally, WWE Raw Holiday Tour is invading Joe Louis Arena at 7:30. So from Santa Claus to the WWE, we really do have a little bit of everything, and you can check it out at Michigan.org.
Absolutely. Isn't that true? Boy, you never know what you're going to find in that events section at Michigan.org, so do that soon. And I tell you what, you're going to know what you're going to find up in the UP at winter time. Newberry, one of those great places to visit, is the official moose capital of the great state of Michigan. And we're going to find out what's happening in Newberry next, right here on Travel Michigan, where your trip begins at Michigan.org.